Welcome to Origins, the podcast that dives deep into the business of venture, where we learn how the people behind the capital, both GPs and LPs, make decisions. I'm Nick Churls, GP at Sapphire Ventures, a newly launched early-stage venture firm celebrating the creative act of building startups.
And I'm Beezer Clarkson, your LP co-host from Sapphire Partners, which is the LP arm at Sapphire. Sapphire Partners invest in exceptional early-stage venture capital managers, both emerging managers and established franchise VCs. And today is a particular pleasure for me. We get to introduce listeners to two guests, both of whom I admire very much and have known for quite a while. One is Mike Maples, a true OG in venture, the founding partner at Floodgate, and also the author of his newly released book, Pattern Breakers, which offers a framework for finding or being a startup that changes the future, or in other words, an actual unicorn. Mike has famously invested in companies like Twitter, Lyft, and Twitch, and has landed himself on the Midas list multiple times. Fortune, of course, calls him legendary, as they would. We also have Jay Das, who is the president at Sapphire Ventures today. He leads Sapphire's growth fund and is a true venture veteran. And just as a quick refresher, because I've now said the word Sapphire 6 different ways, Sapphire Ventures is our direct growth stage investment strategy. They invest in B2B companies, which is different from the Sapphire Partners team that I'm on, which is the LP arm of the business. That's Jay's growth, I'm LP. All that said, let me just sing Jay's praises for a nanosecond. He knows enterprise better than anyone. He has done over a dozen software IPOs, including names like Box, Square, MuleSoft, and JFrog, as well as roughly 20 high-profile acquisitions. And on a personal note, he's someone I've known for over a decade and is just a wonderful human being. So having him on the show today is just a real delight for me.
I'm really excited. I haven't actually met Jay yet, as I'm much more familiar with the LP side of the house at Sapphire, including you and Nate and Laura and all the great LPs on the team at Sapphire. So very excited to meet Jay. And then Mike was actually one of our very early guests on Origins in 2018 and might be our first repeat guest. So I'm very excited to get, yes, I'm very excited to get both their takes on the market today in their respective stages. Jay, obviously, as a growth investor and Mike as an earlier stage investor. And particularly differences across these respective stages.
So to root this episode in our burning question, I think the one that we're really approaching today is how do two leading venture investors, one at seed and one at growth, pick a winner? What are their philosophies on what it takes to be a winner, and how do they go about finding these founders? And curious if they use the same strategies, or maybe it's totally different.
Tons to discuss. Let's bring them in.
Jay and Mike, thank you so much for coming on with us. We're really happy to have you here. Usually, we're going to ask you to introduce yourselves and your firms and what you invest in, but we realized this was the first time you two have met. So really quickly, Jay, please meet Mike. Mike, please meet Jay. You're both wonderful investors that we're so thrilled to be the reasons why you get to say hello to each other.
Hey, Jay, it's good to meet you.
Same here, Mike. After a while, I've heard a lot about you. It's great to finally meet you.
Well, only the good stuff's true.
Are we best friends?
Maybe after the podcast.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, now that we're officially introduced and friends, Jay and Mike, maybe Jay, you go first. Would be great to get the quick elevator pitch, 20 seconds on you and your firms.
I'll start with Sapphire Ventures. And first of all, thank you, Beezer, for having me, and Nick also. And Sapphire Ventures, as you know, what we call them, is a venture growth firm where we invest in the early stages of growth. So think of us as investing in companies which have 8 to 10 million in ARR at the low end, all the way up to like 60, 70 million ARR. And we do primarily it's enterprise software. I would say 90%, 95%. There's always exceptions. And we believe that that's kind of the fun part of growth investing, which is the early stage where companies are still growing rapidly at 50 to 100%. There's a lot of interesting things, product things that are being done. We typically like to be very involved with the companies. So we typically take board seats and spend a lot of time on the product directions and the go-to-market. We also have a large go-to-market team or what we call our platform team or portfolio growth team that is really focused on helping these companies scale both from a go-to-market perspective, but also from a talent perspective. We are currently investing out of our sixth fund, which is a $1.8 billion vehicle. And then myself, I always say, although I've been investing for over 2 decades now, that I'm a recovering developer. I started out my career as a developer. Still like to code a little bit, but not as much as some folks I know who are also investors. But I tend to focus a lot more on infrastructure-oriented software, DevOps. I've done a bunch of stuff around that, but also do a lot of payments and crypto and blockchain investments.
Mike?
I guess probably the easiest way to think of me is I'm one of the OG seed investors. So I helped start a firm called Floodgate close to 20 years ago. And I invest either too early, way too early, or sometimes legally ambiguously too early in startups. And, to kind of give you a sense of how wild it can be, I invested in Twitter when they were deciding whether to call it TWTTR or Voicemail 2.0. I invested in Twitch when it was just a TV. Lyft, my colleague Ann invested in Lyft when it was called Zimride. Okta when it was called Sasher. At Chegg when it was a college classified site. And so, way too early. And when we launched the Lyft service as a part of Zimride, that was the discussion of the board meeting is how do we feel about launching something that's illegal in San Francisco? And so, we, in fact, that's I get a lot of the pitches that I get quite often. The founder will say, well, the thing I need to warn you about is this. I'm not sure if this is legal. So, I'd say that one of the things that characterizes our investment style, because we're so early and because there's so much change ahead, is I like to think of myself as more of a co-conspirator than an investor. And I'm sort of involved in that crazy early pre-product market fit phase where there's usually not any data yet about the company's performance. And so we have to evaluate these opportunities in a pretty different way than traditional investors might evaluate them.
Mike, could you give us the lay of the land of what you're seeing at the ground level and really, really early and even earlier and maybe even earliest, whatever the whole best way of describing it, maybe nudge up to Series A if you want?
Yeah, maybe I'm over fixated on the challenges, but I'd say that there's 2 main challenges. So if I were going to say, what's my business in a sentence, I would say 15% of the startups I invest in need to make somewhere between 20 and 100x on the first check. And if we do that, we'll be good and we'll be successful. So, okay, now let's say that an AI startup comes in and says, I've got this really exciting idea and I'm raising it 100 million post money. Well, okay, to make 20 times your money, assuming no dilution ever, it's got to be worth $2 billion. To make 100x, got to be $10 billion. And you're going to probably get diluted about 60%. So it's got to be between 5 billion and 30 billion exit. And that might happen, but there's not a whole lot of those. And most of the ones that we've achieved that goal on, there was some type of low valuation or reasonable valuation that gave us the upside potential. So that's been the first challenge. Now, that's not true in every sector, but it's certainly true in the exciting ones like AI and things like that. And then the second challenge is kind of related, is I see a lot of very compelling ideas that are very empowering, but not that many insights. And so, and in order to really be successful as a startup, I've always believed it's not enough to just be right. You have to be non-consensus and right. And so there's a lot of ideas I see. I'm like, I can totally see why I would want that. I can see why other people are going to buy this, but I don't know why there's not going to be 10 just like it. And I don't know why Sam Altman's not going to do a demo in 3 months to leapfrog it. And so that's the other challenge that we're seeing. And then I'd say the third kind of quandary that we face from time to time is some of these that we've invested in over the last few years have had these really massive quick run-ups. And so what do you do if you're involved with a really exciting startup, but you're 100 times in the money? and have a chance to sell. So, you kind of face the question of, a lot of LPs are not getting a lot of liquidity right now. And so you have to look at that as well, I think.
Tell us something good, please.
Jay, that must be to you.
No. That was to either. Mike, you tell us something good, and then I'll switch to Jay.
So first of all, why am I in this, right? I'm not really in it to buy low, sell high, right? I have to, that's something I need to care about because people give me money to invest, right? And so they're pretty interested in making a return. But I think that we're going through what I would like to call a sea change. So there's, in my language, there's inflections, which are compelling new events that empower startups to change the subject and not compete by the rules of incumbents. But this is the third time in my life I've seen a sea change. The first was when I was a kid, and it was kind of the era of mass computation and Moore's law and the transistors, the cost of computing becoming asymptotically zero. And then you had mass connectivity that started with the internet and Metcalfe's law and networks being formed and, communications bandwidth becoming commoditized. And now I think we're entering another sea change of mass cognition where, now certain operations of human intelligence are becoming commodity in the same way that communications bandwidth did or that microprocessing did. And that's really compelling because it empowers humanity and it allows us to create new things. And so, it's one of the most exciting times in my career in terms of what I'm seeing and in terms of the innovations that are happening and what's potentially out there. It's just, we have to get careful about how we navigate that as investors because, for example, the early days of the internet, there were a lot of companies where you could have been right about the secular trend, but you would have overpaid and they would have gone to zero. And so, you have to be mindful of the timing and where you are in the cycle and, what is the conventional consensus doing right now?
Jay, what are you seeing at later stages, but particularly B, C's, and D's? Yeah, curious what you're seeing in the market. We can dig in.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask Mike a question, whether he thought the round that SSI did at $1 billion, 5 billion valuation with 10 people, is that a seed deal or is that a venture growth deal?
Well, I root for everybody. And so, I'd like to see everybody succeed who has a good idea. But I always return to home base. The North Star is my business is hard, but not complicated. I need to, 9% of my first checks need to get 20X and 6% need to get 100X if I'm going to be a 10X fund. And that, so if they're raising it 5 billion post, okay. If they're going to be worth between 20 and 100X on that, maybe, but there aren't many of those. And so, it's probably, it might be an exciting opportunity. It might be an exciting angel investment, but I'm paid to, perform at the objective function of 15%, 20 baggers or 100 baggers. And I don't see how those numbers add up in that case.
Well, we'll see. It's they have long ways to go. But Nick, to your question, in our stage, it's still a kind of a haves and have-nots, right? First and foremost, I think most valuations are driven by auctions, and it's not it's not a kind of a DCF or any model that really drives the valuation. It all ends up being how many term sheets did you get, and I think there are companies at our stage which are doing well, which are growing efficiently. Even if they don't have a lot of AI, but if they are getting definitely a lot of interest from a lot of investors because the amount of capital available out there hasn't really gone down significantly, right? I would say it has actually gone up. If CEOs have a little bit of the GenAI pixie dust on them or insecurity, they are able to get 30, 40X kind of multiples even at our stage, right? There's routinely we hear about 8-10 million ARR companies getting done at 500 million to $1 billion valuation. So it's a challenging kind of an environment, right? Because just like as Mike said, we have LPs, they want returns. So how do you make those returns done? And we are kind of, in our strategy has changed a little bit. Like we are trying to do more of a portfolio-based approach where we are taking some earlier stage bets where the nominal valuation is a little lower, but the multiples might be higher given that they are smaller ARR versus doing some kind of nosebleed valuation, 3-4 billion kind of valuation deals where hopefully the IRR is a little bit higher because you exit earlier and the multiples also come down, but they are still 3x, 4x of what the public markets want to pay for these companies. So it's not an easy job.
Mike mentioned looking for non-consensus opportunities at seed or earlier. What does that look like for a growth investor? Like how do you guys internally think about consensus or non-consensus at a B or a C or a D?
So at least for us on the growth side, I think the easy thing to do is look at the metrics, right? So that's kind of table stakes. You look at the growth, you look at how efficient they are growing, you look the CAC ratio, magic number, you can pull apart all of that stuff. I think where we have a lot of discussions, debate, and arguments in our partnership, it's really about how well will this team execute? Because I think, the one thing between seed and growth that doesn't change is the team, right? Because ultimately we have always seen over and over again, there are some teams that can go from, so 0 to 20 and they tap out. They grow from 20 to, 50, 60, then they tap out. I think that is the debate we have the most is that, is this the team? Do they have the wherewithals to go all the way? Because, also there is a big challenge with a lot of the founders where, they raise money at say $1 billion and they get an offer at $1.5 billion and they look like they own like 15% of the company. That's a life-changing kind of situation. So that's where we debate a lot about like, is this a company that's going to become a company of consequence, as we call them, and go all the way? And I still haven't found a good answer for that. It's like I've been probably right 50% of the time and wrong 50% of the time, which means it's a coin toss.
So I'm gonna dove in, Mike. I'm gonna tee you up. Can I tee you up?
Of course.
Reading your book. Can I do the prop? I gotta do the prop. It's so great.
You did the first gambit. I didn't even have to say anything.
No, well, because Jay just bridged it. Because Mike has a new book. Congratulations, Mike. Pattern Breakers, and it talks about how you pick these people that are going to go for the long run. So I was gonna have a complicated version of that, what Jay said so nicely. So I'm just gonna give it back to you, Mike, and say how do you find those people early on so that Jay can then find them later?
Yeah, and there's a lot in what Jay's saying, I think that's pretty important here. So like there's I don't know if any of you all ever read these Howard Marks memos at Oak Tree Capital, right? But I've got a little bit of a crush on him, an intellectual crush on Howard Marks. And he talks about how his son says, I think we should buy Ford stock because they're coming out with a new Mustang. The new Mustangs would be awesome. And Howard says, okay, but who doesn't know that? And so like that's what I'm seeing happen here. It kind of relates to the pattern breakers notion, but fundamentally business is never a fair fight. The only question is who gets to fight unfair. And the default is that the incumbents fight unfair because they have the advantage of the incumbency. And so for a startup to matter, it has to not compete by the current rules. It has to, establish a new pattern, if you will. It has to refuse the premise of the rules and show up out of left field and change the subject. And so what I look for are these pattern breaking founders. I look for founders who are going to not think of the future as an extension of the present, but are going to think of the future as something radically different and convince the rest of us to move off of the arc of the present that we're on into a different path to a different future. And that just takes a certain type of person. And so, but like, I guess when I think about my business, I have to invest in this stuff way too early. And so I need to care, this is where I'm different from Howard Marks. Howard would probably talk about margin of safety. I need to care about the margin of asymmetry on the upside. And that's why I need to care whether there's a path to 20x in one set of circumstances or 100x in another, because I've got to get paid for the risk I take, because I'm taking crazy high risk with these pattern breaking founders. And most of the time it's not going to work. So what matters in my business is the magnitude of how right I am in the case that I'm right. And I would imagine that in Jay's business, it's not quite that extreme, but I imagine that they still have to know things the market doesn't know, because when a company's starting to break out, it's not like that's not obvious. It's not like people aren't tracking that. It's not like people don't know that. And so Jay still has to find a way to know something the market doesn't know to make sure that he's not overpaying for the exciting opportunities. But I think in all cases, right, when you're an investor, if you're going to outperform the consensus, which you have to do if you're in venture, because you have to be an active investor by definition, you have to know something the market doesn't know, or you shouldn't be writing any checks.
How do you think about the difference between knowing something the market doesn't know and like believing something that the market doesn't yet believe? Right? Because those are two different things. Like we're talking about actual like information and facts versus like taking all those facts and information together and actually forming a different conclusion. I don't know if that's too nuanced of a question, but to me, those are very different things.
For us, we have a little bit of an advantage because we do a lot of customer calls. So before we invest, like we actually spend, ungodly amounts of money with all of the TGSs and the guide points of the world, because we spend a lot of time talking to customers and seeing what they like, what they don't. And I think that is probably the number one predictor for us, is that they have something that is better than somebody else, right? Because, customers are, although they're pretty forthright. It's amazing how forthright they are about the choice of this. And then look, I think again, just like Mike, we spend a lot of time with the management team, because there is this, at least at our stage, the management team is quasi-formed, right? Most of it is there, and who's going to take them for the next 2-3 years. We try to due diligence the team and how good they are, whether the CEO is really enabling other people's to work or, kind of dominating the conversation. So yeah, we try to actually triangulate a lot on the management team to see if the vision, the product roadmap they have, and whether they have the grit to kind of execute on that vision, right? So and we don't always get it right, but as Mike said, in our business, again, it's not as bifurcated, but most of our returns are driven by a smaller number of companies. So it's not evenly distributed, right? So in the same way that if you, even at 50%, if you are right, some of those 50% are really, really, really big returns, then you're actually doing quite well.
One thing that I might add to this is I do think I think you've got to have some way of looking at these things that isn't the same way that other people do. Because otherwise you'll end up drifting to the consensus, right? And so like in our case, we look for three main things. The first is there an inflection? And an inflection is an external change event. Like in the case of Lyft, the inflection was the iPhone 4S had a GPS chip in it. And so inflections matter because they answer the why now question, but they also answer the empowerment question. So like an entrepreneur needs some unfair advantage to wage asymmetric warfare on the present, and the inflection is how they do that. And an inflection is not a trend, it's a turning point. So like the day before the iPhone 4S, you could have had the idea for ride sharing, wouldn't have mattered. You couldn't have implemented a system that embodied that idea. The day after it, all of a sudden something is possible today that wasn't possible yesterday for the first time ever. And so that's why it's an inflection. And then the insight behind Lyft was, that means you could do Airbnb for cars. So like the inflection happened regardless of Lyft. But most founders, they're just doing the same thing as yesterday. They don't realize that the thing that's in their pockets has unlocked a new empowering set of capabilities that could change the future. But every now and then somebody does. There's an outlier. There's the Lyft guys. There's Travis over at Uber. And the insight does come from the creativity of the founder, but it needs to be non-consensus and right. And when you think about it, it's obvious, because if everybody agrees with the idea, it's too much like the present. It's too much like what's already known. human beings are conditioned to like things. So if everybody likes a new idea, it's too much like what people already like, which means it's too much occupying the market according to the current rules. What you want is a product that most people don't like, and that a small set of people are just incredibly attracted to. And so, you had asked this earlier about consensus. How do you know if you're non-consensus and wrong versus right? The problem is you don't, right? In the beginning, you only know that you're non-consensus. You don't know for a fact that you're right. If you knew that you were right, the future would have already been determined, right? And so every breakthrough starts out being non-consensus and right. And what you have as a founder is a first mover advantage into the future. And which kind of leads to the third point that we look for is, we call it founder future fit. So like, when Justin Kahn started Justin TV, live broadcasting his life 24/7 over the internet is a terrible idea. One of the worst business ideas I've ever heard.
Like certifiably insane.
It was crazy, right? And thankfully it pivoted to Twitch. But but Justin wanted to be an influencer before there was a word to describe what an influencer was, right? Like he was an incredibly authentic match to the future he was pursuing, just like Andreessen was when he did the Mosaic browser, or Castor Eunice at Applied Intuition, or some of these other companies. And so why is that important? If you have an authentic match to the future, if you're intrinsically motivated by it, if you're tinkering with the inflections that it embodies, if you're building what's missing in that future, your intuition about what to build is far more likely to be right. And your ability to attract other early believers to your idea is far more likely to be right. And so that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the founder that has the first mover advantage into the future. Their current implementation of the product may be off. That's why 80% of our profits have come from pivots. If you have a first mover advantage into the future, you're learning, regardless of whether the implementation's on target. You could pivot around the customer or the implementation until you get product market fit. But you want to be pursuing a future that others aren't pursuing yet, because that's how you have the chance to have the super performance and the outsized returns.
Can I double click on your comment about pivots? Because I thought that was really interesting about so many of the exits came from pivots. And Jay, I want to pull you into this. When the pivots happen, are they pre-growth stage, or is this en route to growth? So, or Jay, do you see pivots too? And I guess the question would be like, obviously pivots seem to be connected. Is it causation or correlation with exits? And how does that play out in both of your investing?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, what we are a little bit luckier in the sense that we don't have to find the pivots, right? Most companies have done that. And the other thing is that we kind of invest more in the boring category of enterprise software. So there, actually it's a little bit easier to like, look, I'll be honest, I can't be a consumer investor because I have no idea what the trends are or kind of find something like a lift. But in enterprise software, it's not always that you have to build a new category. Like, yes, and sometimes actually harder to do it if you are building a new category. But, every time there's a platform shift, there is a big company that starts out. So great example is Datadog, right? Datadog, what they were doing is not completely new because, there was BMC, EA, CA before them. And there was like a bunch of companies that failed, like Boundary and like Nimsoft, didn't go anywhere. But Datadog was, timed it really well. And there was a whole platform shift going from client server onto cloud computing. And they just focused on that. By the way, Beezer and Nick, you had asked me whether it happens in the growth stage, and it does too, right? Like I was part of Apogee, and and they became an API gateway and created the whole category when it was even not there, right? And they kind of, was the as you said, Mike, repivoting of SOA into kind of APIs, and they figured out that APIs was addressing. And again, in the same journey, companies pivot along, right? Or add more products that is adjacent to them. So I think the really great management teams are very, we say this, and it's, unless you see it in real time, and you don't always realize, but that's, again, another thing. The execution is not only about, how well you manage your employees, but how good you are with your customers, but also reading and understanding what is the customer demand and where is the puck moving to, so that you can actually add and even change your product even at a later stage.
Given it's 2024 and we're talking about inflections, Do we do a few minutes on AI and how that's inflecting or not inflecting? Overvalued, undervalued? How are you two approaching this market? Because it's evolved a lot. I mean, I'm just not going to try to describe all the things that have changed just in the last 9 months. But given your different focuses, how are you feeling about it today? And whoever wants to start.
I'll give it a shot because I guess I'm the inflection guy.
You're Inflection.
So
Are we doing full AI pivot?
yeah. So here's the thing, right? Like the AI stuff is really exciting, and I think that there's a lot of inflections. All these new LLMs. All kinds of things, and they seem to happen every week. The challenge I've had is finding opportunities where you feel like it's going to be long-term defensible, where there's a structural competitive advantage. So a few years ago, I invested in a company called Applied Intuition that does simulation software for autonomous vehicles and, is now doing stuff with the military and helping the EV guys. Why did I invest in it? I thought, okay, there needs to be a change event in the market that is massive and where not changing that decision's unavailable to the companies. So like there aren't very many companies who are in the car industry who are saying, I don't care about EVs. I don't care about autonomous vehicles, right? Like if you're the CEO of General Motors and you don't care about those things, you're not going to be CEO for very long, right? And so then the second thing you look for is it's going to require a software-defined, AI-centric set of skills that they know that they don't have, that they've abandoned pretenses of pretending they know how to do it. And then you say, okay, we have some talent on this team that you can't get anywhere else in the world. We have a bunch of the Tesla full self-driving people on our team. We've got people from Waymo. We've got people from Google Maps. We've got people from Zoox, all these companies. And so, like, if we work together, we'll get to the promised land. But, and then you need a CEO who can look across the table from the CEO of a car company and ask for these giant contracts, right, of hundreds of millions of dollars. And if you can have those things present in a startup, I think you can win because, OpenAI isn't going to do just some demo that General Motors is going to say, okay, yeah, we'll just take all that stuff and put it in our cars. But you want to have a founder who can sit across from a C-level executive and say, look, it's not going to be a traditional vendor, supplier, customer relationship. You're going to be a lighthouse customer. We're going to co-create the future together. We're going to lead each other to the promised land by going after a grand challenge that your business cares a whole lot about.
Mike, is there anything left that is non-consensus in AI, particularly generative AI today? Like, would you make seed or pre-seed investments today?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, and the reason I like the term non-consensus is that's, to me, different from, say, contrarian. So contrarian is sort of, in my view, a different form of conformity.
Contrarian is like, we do not believe in AI at all. AI is like vaporware.
When you're being a contrarian, you're still defining your views relative to other people's view. And so, like, what you want is to be non-consensus in the sense that you discovered something that's not obvious, but it's not like you're making some provocative contrarian statement by investing in it. You're just saying, I found someone who's living in the future who discovered what was missing in the future that's not obvious before other people discovered it. And that's where you want to be, I think. But it goes back to the Howard Marks thing with the new Mustang, right? Who doesn't know that? And you want to find something about the future that is offered to you by an authentic time traveler. And you're like, wow, that's not obvious. That changed my reality. And I think this person could pull it off. I think this person is the ideally suited person or set of people to go chase it.
Jay, you announced $1 billion in commitments to invest in AI-powered enterprise technology startups. That's a lot of money. You didn't put it all into SSI seed round.
Exactly. We didn't do that.
Where are we planning to invest $1 billion in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So, look, there is no doubt that GenAI is going to have a huge impact on everything we do in our lives. It already has, and it's going to get more and more. And I think some of the really, really unique use cases, like like Lyft did when the iPhone came out with the GPS chip, I think is all being done. Like it's probably what Mike will see. We are not going to see it, right? Because I think it's still in the early days where people are saying, right? So what we are seeing is that on the GenAI side, in the short run, the incumbents actually will have a lot of staying power. This is the first time the incumbents are not sitting still. Like every software company has huge amounts of stuff that they're doing around Gen AI. And of course, Microsoft, Google, Amazon are, kind of beyond everybody else, right? So what we are trying to do is trying to see where we can invest and still get our 3 to 4x kind of a return. And what we believe, and, wrongly or rightly, is that on the foundational model level, that ship has sailed. That's like now you have to have, companies like SSI raising $1 billion to train new models from scratch. And even there, I think a lot of it is probably going to go to all the open source models, and we'll see how the closed source models actually make money. And the last thing I will say is that I would say 80% of our portfolio companies are all building GenAI features on top of it, some more than others, but there is not a single company that is not doing something around GenAI. So a lot of it also, our team is spending, with these portfolio companies and kind of creating ways for them to share knowledge and to kind of build all these GenAI kind of features around them. And look, we are patient investors. We don't have to invest $1 billion in a year, so we are going to keep doing that. But I do think that any company that comes to us and doesn't have in their roadmap something around generative AI, that's something that we won't look at.
I was just thinking about how many times do I use ChatGPT, and is everyone at the firm watching what I do on ChatGPT? But that little brain bubble aside.
but I use Perplexity, by the way, Beezer. I'm like a big fan of Perplexity.
I do.
And,
I'm a big fan too. I have to admit.
And my kid uses it a lot, and he's always like, "Dad, why did you pass on them twice?" I'm like, "It's not enterprise software, and I really don't know how they're going to make money." But other than that, it's a great product.
I have to ask all the LP stereotypical questions. That's my role. So the other question.
You do a great job.
And I do a great job being stereotypical. I quite love my co-host, Nick. So the question on people's minds in 2024 is also the exit market, because it's a toughie right now, right? But given you're both masters at finding exits, right? I mean, Mike, I want to say your Midas list 8 times, if I'm not mistaken. Quite a few, quite a long list. Jay, you've had about 14 IPOs, 20 plus acquisitions. You guys have found exits. How do you think about exits in this market, and what should people know? Like the founders, the other investors, what's on your mind about exits right now?
I'd also be curious to know from Jay, like as a later stage investor, do you perhaps have more influence on that than earlier stage investor?
I'll answer your question first, Nick. We don't have more influence than anybody else because at some point, right, we're not controlling majority owners, right? So it is really, we are part of a board, we might have up to 20, 25, if you're lucky, 25%, although that's very rare that you own that much. So it's really driven by the CEO. And, and in our business, what I've found is that CEO kind of drives it, right? If the CEO wants to exit at some point, then you're kind of exited. But to your question, Beezer, about exits, I think, one of the things that, VCs don't really focus on is exits. Like if you talk to any PE investor, they'll say exit is entry is important. All of the platform stuff is important, and then exit is equally important. I don't think venture investors always think about exits, right? And I think, slowly, LPs are telling them, I've heard like LPs are trying to coach their GPs about, hey, exits are important, what you need to do, and there are some funds who actually have this stated thing where every time they get an up round, they'll sell like a 10%, or if it reaches like a 10 or 20x kind of a multiple, they'll sell a third of it. So, there are ways to kind of do that. But I do think in general, I think a lot of the exits, for VCs, unfortunately, will be PE firms or will be like, companies like Constellation Software that buys up these, kind of SaaS businesses, and they're not going to get a lot of, huge multiple on those deals. And that's already starting to happen, right? Now, the big thing with investors is that at the end of the day, can you clear the preference stack? But if you do clear the preference stack, how much does the common make? And that is a very a specific question that employees are asking when companies have 800 billion, 2 billion of preference stacks, is that the business is not growing as fast. Am I ever going to make any money?
One of the advantages of being a seed fund is you're not quite as impactful to the cap table in some of these situations. And so we decided this year, so we're investing in Fund 7 right now. We decided that we wanted to get Fund 6 in the carry this year. And that there were a couple of situations where you had some really exciting companies, but you're 100 times in the money. And the interesting thing is, it's usually not hard to sell in those situations because everybody's like, hey, dude, you got to do me a solid. You said you might sell some. Could you sell more? And so like when everybody's excited, it's not hard to sell. It's hard to sell when everybody starts wanting to sell. Yeah. But when everybody wants to buy and when everybody thinks it can only go up from here, it's surprisingly easy to sell. And if anything, you get pressure to sell more than you want to sell if you show any sign of willingness to sell. So, we got into a situation where we have some companies where it's like, okay, let's say you've made 100 times your money in 5 years. You probably ought to at least consider selling some of that because, if it goes up another 10x, 100x from there, your LPs are still going to be happy with what's left, right?
I will concur.
But 100x is real money, and it's easy to get caught up in your own. You start breathing your own fumes, and so I think that sometimes. When you have these run-ups that happen really fast and the company's legitimately exciting, but like you step back and you say, whoa, it has to be like one of the most exciting companies on the planet now for us to not sell. And even then, probably we should sell some. So we've been trying pretty hard about that to find paths to liquidity without it being unnatural acts. I think that most people overemphasize getting liquidity from the ones that are struggling. Yeah. And I don't think that ever ends up moving the needle. I think that ends up just sucking your time. You're way better off kind of saying, these are the ones that are going to impact the fund. Everybody's excited about it. Everybody will buy at any price. Should we take an offer we shouldn't refuse?
That is the hardest decision, Mike. Taking the exciting ones, because you always think it's going to do better, right? Till it doesn't sometimes.
Yeah. And when you're a seed fund, the advantage is you can go to the CEO who you've known for a long time by now, and you can say, look, there's other types of investors you're going to want in this company for the long term. You're going to want people like Fidelity, or you're going to want folks that can position you to go public someday. And, I'll still be here and be a co-conspirator, but it's like there's a way to manage this that's good for the long-term capital structure of the company. And, if you get ahead of that, far enough ahead of that, by the time it happens, by the time the opportunity arises, the CEO is like, okay, you're going to do this with me, right? And so, you kind of you don't want to just react to the situation when it happens. But when you start to get this sense of, man, this thing is really getting some elevation. And, I think in every round, you always have to be a buyer or seller. And you can't just be neutral, right? Like, I think you always have to have an opinion about whether you're buyer or seller.
I feel like on this podcast, we talk a lot about investing and potentially selling things over time. I'm also just curious, like how you guys think about founder liquidity and founder secondary, and also like coaching founders through that process, potentially including employees in the company. I know Jay also talked about this, so just curious to hear your perspectives on when those situations do happen. Founders also selling a lot. Like, how do you specifically like coach founders through that?
I can go first. So first and foremost, I think being a founder CEO is a very lonely place. So I think, we absolutely recommend them, either join a kind of organization like 10X CEO or get an executive coach And over again, I've found that people who don't always take the recommendation actually, tap out at a much earlier level, right? Because you learn a lot from being in these kind of peer groups or with an executive coach who has done this before. So it is very important, I think, for founders and CEOs to kind of have that coaching. Maybe it's not even an independent board member that they really trust, that they have a blind side, they're a product guy or a product person, and and they need go-to-market kind of chops, right? So surrounding yourself with people in their blind spots is really, really key for a CEO to scale. Founder liquidity is a very, very kind of a nuanced topic. I think I understand that founders need liquidity and they should take money out, but how much do you take out is always an issue, right? Because if you take out 100 million each to founders or 200 million, you're not going to show up for work. But is taking out like 5 million in the Bay Area to buy a house? I don't think that's egregious at all. So it's a very nuanced thing, and we are not against founder liquidity, but there is definitely certain numbers that causes us to kind of say, okay, why are you selling? Maybe then you should just leave the company at this point.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think that Jay and I are probably pretty similar minded when it comes to this. I think that you want the CEO and the founding team to be on a footing of let's win, let's change the future, let's do whatever it takes to win. And if they're dealing with a life of just deprivation, there's a level at which it interferes with their ability to play to win. Yeah. And I see this happen more with 30-something CEOs who have spouse and kids, and they have other interests in life, right? Whereas if you're Dylan Field at Figma or Zuck in the early days, you probably can live a much more Spartan lifestyle and not feel deprived. And so I think that there is a level of deprivation that people might experience that's counterproductive, but that's different from getting rich enough not to be a startup guy anymore. And so, when you take enough money off the table that you're buying a second house and you're taking private jets to Miami to party for certain situations and stuff like that, and I start to see them become Instagram famous and all those types of things, that gets me kind of nervous. Mm-hmm. But, on some level, the high order bit there is I probably backed the wrong person in the first place, because like the best founders that I've worked with, they care about money, but they're not that focused on money. They're much more focused on winning. Yeah. And so like, if taking some off the table allows us to retain that focus, I think that can be good. But if it's like I get rich before I deliver the outcome, not so good.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Those are no more questions. That was awesome.
That's it?
That's it. It's so good. I don't want to mess it up. It was so good. Thank you so much for both coming.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks for listening to Origins, the show where we discuss the venture ecosystem through the lens of myself, GP, and Beezer LP.
Be sure to tune in next time for a bonus mini-sode where we unpack our learnings from this conversation.
You can find that right here in this feed. And while you're there, please rate and review the podcast. It's super helpful for other folks looking for venture insights to find our show.
Origins is produced by OpenLP, a resource from Sapphire Partners for the venture ecosystem to stay on top of the latest VC insights, and done in partnership with Pod People. Please also subscribe to the OpenLP newsletter for a monthly roundup of GP and LP thought leadership, including the newest Origins episodes delivered straight to your inbox. We'll put the link in the speaker notes. I am Beezer Clarkson.
And I'm Nick Charles, and we'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.